Hi everybody, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the difference between hear and listen. These are going to be some of those tricky words that, a lot of people have a hard time with, but we're going to go through this together, and at the end of this video, you're actually going to be able to use those words accordingly. So stick with me to the end of this video, and you're actually going to be able to use those words more precisely. But just before we dive right into the content, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and to activate the notifications bell so that YouTube will let you know whenever I drop a new video. We're going to jump right into the content now. There are so many people who use hear and listen pretty much interchangeably, but there's a critical difference between them. We're actually going to be looking at some of the differences between hear and listen, and we're also going to be looking at a couple more details about hear and listen. I'm talking about situations in which the word hear is actually used to mean something that's pretty much close to the word listen to. We're actually going to be doing some sort of going back and forth between hear and listen and diving deeper and deeper as we go on. Without further ado, we're going to start off by talking about the word listen. The first thing I want to point out is the fact that listening actually describes an intentional activity. I mean, like when you're listening, you're sort of actively trying to hear something. I'm talking about being really attentive. On the other hand, hearing is something that happens without any intentional effort. I'm talking about hearing something even when you don't want to hear it. In other words, even when you're not actively trying to hear it. And by the way, when you're actively trying to hear it, then you're listening, because that's intentional and you're trying to understand something. So that's what it means to listen. When you're actually making a conscious decision to listen and understand something, because you're actively trying to understand whatever it is you're listening to. I'm going to give you two examples that contain hear and listen. And those examples are actually going to help us to see the contrast between hear and listen. Ready? Okay, let's start off. I listened to my parents talking in the bathroom this morning, and I couldn't hear what they were talking about inside. I'm sure you noticed something interesting here. In other words, even if you're trying to hear, you don't always hear what you're trying to hear. I'm going to give you another example. One of my friends told me a very boring story yesterday, and guess what? I stopped listening until I heard somebody call my name. What is so different about this example? I'm sure you've noticed that even if you're not listening, you might hear something. I'm going to give you some sort of a side note here before we start off. Listen is often used with the word to. I'm going to give you a couple of examples in which listen or listen to cannot be replaced by hear. Hey, what kind of music do you listen to? You can't replace the word listen to by hear. It's not gonna make sense. Here's another example. When I talk to my daddy, he pretty much does all the talking, and I just sit and listen because he's such a wise person and I want to learn as much as I can from him. I just sit and listen. You can't replace the word listen by hear because it's not gonna make sense at all. Hey, listen, I just got fired, so I gotta get a new job. You can't say hear in that context. It's not gonna make sense whatsoever. Hey, listen to this. Everybody wants to be successful, but not everybody is willing to pay the price to be successful. Now, I'm gonna give you a couple of examples in which hear cannot be replaced by listen or listen to, because hear is talking about something that a person cannot control, like hearing somebody call your name or hearing a gunshot. Like you're not actively thinking about it. My grandmother got up in the morning today and she told me that she heard a loud noise during the night. Like she wasn't thinking about it. It was sudden, unexpected. My grandfather is getting old and he can't hear very well. Like it doesn't hear sounds like, the wind and all that kind of stuff. So whenever I think about calling him, I just shout. Now let's talk about cases where hear is used to mean something that's pretty close to listen or listen to. I'm gonna give you a couple of examples. I heard a really interesting program on the radio this morning. The word heard can actually be replaced by listen. And it's going to be something like, I listened to a very interesting program on the radio this morning. So hear is pretty close to listen. I'm going to give you another example. a large audience gathers pretty much every week to hear my friend speak. You know why? Because he's such a successful businessman. This begs the question, why is hear used instead of listen to? This is because the emphasis in each case is on the content rather than the activity of listening. So here's the bottom line. Here, you don't have to make a conscious decision to hear. Like you physically and intuitively experience the sense of sound. Sometimes the sound you hear is pretty much unexpected, like an explosion or a gunshot, something like that. But when it comes to listening, you actually get to make a conscious decision to listen to something. And remember, listen is sometimes used with the word to, like listen to. For example, what kind of music do you listen to? Now to wrap it up, when you're sleeping, you may hear the thunder. And when you get up in the morning, somebody may come up to you and say, hey, did you hear the thunder last night? Like, it wasn't intentional. But when you go to the doctor may measure your heartbeats and listen to your heart. Use a machine or something like that. And it's intentional, which is different from hearing, which is not intentional. Hear, it's not intentional. Listen, it's intentional. Like you are actively trying to listen to understand. But when you hear, oftentimes, you're not trying to understand. When somebody's talking about a math problem, you gotta listen to understand. Otherwise, you're not gonna be able to understand a word. And while listening, you might hear somebody call your name. Like, you're listening to your teacher talking about the math problem, and that's intentional. And then you hear somebody call your name, and that's not intentional. Okay guys, I want to say thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. See you tomorrow.